Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling and election analysis in the United States. And today we're going to be looking at the 2024 presidential election. Make sure to hit the like button to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And so, looking for my prediction, we're going to be playing around with the demographic swingometer, which basically has the exact demographic margins for the 2020 presidential election. Now, Donald Trump, right now, currently in my adjusted aggregate, is leading by around 3 points nationally as of right now, which spells really bad signs for Kamala Harris, because if he's really up 3 points nationally, it's going to be a bad sign for Kamala Harris. And this is done basically adjusting the aggregate to a basically accurate electorate from Atlas Intel, which is about R+1. When you do this exact same thing for 2020, you literally get a perfect map. And so looking at this now, we see that right now, currently Donald Trump won the non-college vote 62-36. I say maybe he improves by like maybe 2 points with this group. Maybe he does slightly better with non-college voters. With college whites, I actually think he does a little bit better with this group. I actually think he does do slightly better with college whites. And we've even seen it in the crosstabs quite a bit where he actually gains more with college educated voters than he is with non-college. Now, Kamala Harris has more of a weakness with non-college than Joe Biden did, so maybe she does actually do a little bit worse. But now, looking at this math, she's only up by 2.1% in the national popular vote. The African-American vote, based on crosstabs from Rasmussen, Intel, Atlas, and Big Poll Data, some of the most accurate national polls we see out there, he's averaging around 25% of the black vote, and this puts him ahead somewhat comfortably in the popular vote, give or take. The Hispanic vote, Harris leads that by just a couple points in a lot of the polling. I believe it averages out of 48 to 41%. So this puts them up by roughly, give or take, 3.2%. And that Asian vote margin, I believe, is about also somewhat similar to a 10-point margin, which puts Donald Trump at about 51% of the national popular vote to Harris's 47%. And funny enough, like we saw before, Gold Crown Politics' adjusted aggregate beforehand does actually show a 47% approval rating adjusted for undecideds with Kamala Harris. And every time you look for example, looking with Donald Trump, every time you look for his recall approval rating, he's always getting a high amount of the vote share. Now, I believe in the Atlas Intel poll, they do have Hispanics outvoting. They actually do have Hispanics technically outvoting blacks by about a point or so. We also have the non-college educated vote. I believe the electorate in the Atlas Intel poll, give or take, is about, we'll be able to kind of calculate, I believe it's 70% white. So when you go ahead and kind of lower these margins here to kind of like fill that in essentially, so 45 plus 26 is about 71. So when you keep lowering this 25%, give or take, you're kind of about there. And you're looking at this. This is a 4.3 popular vote victory in the Electoral College. Now, with African Americans, you do see that that is being slightly oversampled. So maybe, because I know they had Hispanics at about 12. They also had roughly, give or take, African Americans at about 11%. And I believe with Asian / other, I believe it was about 6% of the electorate, give or take. And so he's actually up pretty big in the popular vote. He's up by roughly, give or take, according to this estimate, by about 5. This may be overestimating him with certain groups. If we look at 46 plus 25, that's about a 71% electorate. So we lower that by about a point. That does technically put Donald Trump now, looking at this, basically at roughly a 3.8 percentage point margin, which is very similar to the Atlas Intel poll. So it's very close to what actually was the poll back then. And so now, looking at this, Donald Trump's getting about 73 million votes in the Electoral College to Kamala Harris's 67. So basically, looking at those improved crosstabs from those polls, kind of matching up the electorate with the Alice Intel poll, which is the most accurate pollster nationwide, you get a result that's very strikingly similar to what Alice Intel polls has. And Donald Trump is literally completely just knocking this out of the park in the Electoral College. I mean, he is destroying Kamala Harris in the Electoral College. I mean, he's getting his 313 victory. But if we were to fill this out on an electoral map, guys, I mean, it's not even close. I mean, at this point, all of the safe Republican states are basically baked into the cake, give or take. And with him getting about 25% of the African American vote, if he's really getting that, that's going to really put him across the line in states like Georgia and North Carolina, and possibly even have them trend to the right by quite a bit. I know Iowa and Ohio are still likely margins in this forecast, which again, right now, it's actually quite funny, but Iowa is about a 13-point win, give or take. And this is what's interesting. The latest Ann Seltzer poll is Iowa +4, but the one from basically the one from September 4 years ago was tied. So he's doing 4 points better than last year's September poll, and the final poll was about +7. So if you come up with about a Trump +11 result in August, let's say that's the case. Let's say it is Trump +11, and she did underestimate him by about a point. This would kind of match up with the Trump +12.5 victory that we have right here in the state of Iowa. Wouldn't that be a really freaking crazy coincidence if that happened? Not only that, Minnesota, when you reweigh the polling data, it is really close as well. Virginia, we recently had a tied poll out of there. New York has had polls where Harris is up 12 to 13 points in the state. So everything's kind of lining up here to being sort of, really lining up here in the Electoral College. Even Texas, Florida, I mean, they're big wins in this scenario. I mean, he's just killing it. These are kind of around the margins that I have in the states. North Carolina, an 11-point victory. That is just a humongous win. Georgia, a 12-point win. And again, that comes from Donald Trump getting like 25% of the black vote nationally. You're going to see an increase of support for him in the Sun Belt if that is the case. And that mostly would be fueled by black men if that does happen. Even if he's getting like 20%, let's say he does get like 20, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. He's like leaning the Rust Belt. He's basically leading Harris by around 3.2%, which is around the 3.5-point win. So it's not even that ridiculous either. And so what's quite fascinating is that with the current demographics that we have in the split of the electorate, it's sort of matching up with what we got right now in terms of the popular vote from Alice Intel and what we sort of have in the Electoral College. All of the Rust Belt states, I mean, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, 5 and 5.1 point victories, respectively. Michigan around a 4.5-point win. California is still a safe margin right now, give or take. In this forecast, DC, Maryland, Massachusetts, as well as Vermont are also, clearly in that, Democrat column. And I mean, the margins are fairly similar, but Maryland's kind of an interesting one because Maryland is roughly around a 19-point win. And we've had polls where Harris is up in the state of Maryland by like 21, 20, 22%, which is not that far off from what this has. So again, something very interesting to kind of ponder upon. Now, it does seem like, in the likely states, she's doing all right. Illinois, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, she's doing okay. Alaska, she's probably winning that or Trump is winning that fairly easily, 18 points. Hawaii is around an 18-point win for Kamala Harris there. New York is around a 13-point victory, like we stated earlier. But Maine is actually a pretty decent margin for Harris. She's winning that by a couple points and is winning the Maine's 2nd congressional district by 12, winning Maine's 1st by about 17. So again, some interesting stuff out of the state of Maine at large. And looking at Nebraska, I mean, that district is really close, which we also have that district as about a tilt margin too, by the way. New Mexico is about a lean margin. That's kind of what we have it at right now. We have it as a 2.5 point victory for Harris. And Arizona and Nevada, those margins are fairly similar to what we have it at as well too. So again, very interesting to think about. And New Hampshire, a 2.8 percentage point win. I mean, if she's doing okay with college educated voters, kind of like what we have here, and there's still a decent amount of the electorate, you could see why that would be the case. Now, I do think if Trump is winning Wisconsin and Pennsylvania by 5, he's probably going to win New Hampshire, but this kind of would make sense. And Minnesota and Virginia, these are tilt Democrat states according to this model here. We see Minnesota 0.5%, Virginia 0.4%, and this kind of even matches up with Virginia voting to the right of Minnesota, which I expect to be the case this cycle. I actually think Virginia is kind of going to trend to the right a little bit more than Minnesota, mainly because in Virginia, yes, you do have the Nova area, but on top of that, you've actually seen Donald Trump in a lot of the polling data kind of gain with government workers, which is pretty interesting, and there's a lot more of them than in Minnesota. You also have a pretty high Muslim population in Virginia and in Minnesota, so it would make sense for them to kind of trend similarly to the right as well, considering that those are shifting to Donald Trump. Virginia does have more of an African American population as well, which kind of affects the Sun Belt quite a bit in terms of the margins in certain states. So that is also really interesting to think about. But overall, I mean, right now he's winning the Electoral College with pretty good ease in this new forecast. If you guys did enjoy this analysis, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.